Charles Rogers. He had all these paints. His studio smelled like potatoes, kind of. Potatoes and house paint. Like that metal smell. And he had this little art table. It's almost like a drafting board. And he had like just all these paints. Like a plethora of paints. Like I have a lot of paints. He had way more paints than I do. It's almost something I've tried to work up to, actually, just to have that much paint. Yeah, it's crazy. So I would sit there with this spotlight of a light on the table and just draw with this tiny little IKEA half pencil all these little illustrations. And then I would take all these paints and just paint on top of them. And I had no patience. I mean, I don't have much patience now, but I got no patience then. And I would just paint on top of layer, on top of layer, on top of layer, on top of layer. I could have been an oil painter at that point. It all turned gray and brown. The reds were strong, but I was only doing like these little thumbnail ones. And he was like, you gotta go bigger. If you want to have that much detail, you gotta go bigger. And I was like, I don't know, man, this is intense. Mind you, I'm like 10. So my idea of intense and now intense, not the same thing. But there was this fear about just going big. Because when you go big, you have this responsibility to make these tiny little details. It can't just look like skin. It's gotta look like it feels like skin. It can't just have a face. It's gotta feel like those shoulders have this weight to them. The hair has this motion to it. It's all kind of crazy. In those like moments when you try and make all these things, you don't think about them, but then when you're done looking at them, you find yourself kind of just staring into the abyss, so to speak. All the things you could have done after you'd already done it, and it's completely dry. Do I go back with watercolor? Do I go back with ink? Do I go back with Prisma? Do I go back with marker? Do I go forward with other colors? Do I go backwards with water? Do I find the grain in the paper and work towards it or against it? Do I take my X-Acto knife and scratch little pieces off I don't like after they're done and then paint over them? There's a lot of possibilities, all of which will drive you crazy. I guess that's kind of why I like doing ink washes. I was talking to this young artist today, a youth, as you would say, and we were just going back and forth about all these different types of styles and stuff that people do, having to make sure, when you do this and you do that, you can use this part, but if you do that part, then you have to use these parts. And it was just like ink, oil-based inks versus water-based inks. You can still use water-based inks if you use grease kind of inks, but you have to make sure to use them in the proper order. You can't, once you put the water base down, you can't then go over it again. You could, but it's messy and you'll lose a lot of your details. I typically have like 5 or 7 inks. I don't use them all for one painting, don't get me wrong. I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. But I've been known to use like 3 or 4 sometimes. It really kind of depends on what type and texture they go with. I've used other oil-based inks on top of other oil-based inks because I needed a dark, rich kind of chalkiness to it that I couldn't get from the water-based. it'll drive you a little nuts. Trying to get everything going. I guess that's kind of why I like water-based. It's playful, but not too serious. With ink base, it's just, with a grease base, it's such a serious action. You can't just make a line. You have to make a line with purpose. Or you have to not give a fuck. One of the two. I've found both work well. I don't know, man. My week's been good. It felt long, but I think that's because I had the last 2 weekends off, because one was Alex's birthday and then the next was my birthday. Thank you all for your birthday wishes, by the way. That was really nice. It was really, really wonderful to just check in and see all the comments and everything. So thank you. Right now I'm just kind of working on illustrations. I did all the paintings for the show. So now I'm just kind of waiting. And I'm making these huge illustrations to go alongside them. That will look like madness. Madness is